The season is truly upon us. And how do we know that? Well, it's because we are at Big Ten Media Days, the unofficial start of college football for the Big Ten Conference. We had day one today, which pretty much was an Ohio State day. So let's talk a bit about what Ohio State had to offer today, the things they said about Michigan and other notable things. And we'll get to a couple little Michigan tidbits as well on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday from here in Indianapolis. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I am your man on the ground here at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, Indiana for Big Ten Media Days, day one, as part of the brand new look Big Ten Media Days, which are now 3 days compared to being 2. Feels a lot more relaxed, starts a little bit later, ends around the same time. It's just a completely different deal. Now, there wasn't a big Michigan contingent here. Only a couple other reporters who cover Michigan were here. Certainly shout out to the On3 guys who got to be at the golf outing in Ann Arbor, interview some Michigan people, including Sharon Moore, so check out their coverage over there. But we are here finding out the tenor of the conference, getting to a little bit more of an understanding of what is going on here as we prepare for Michigan to take its turn on day 3. But nonetheless, there are some interesting things that have come out of today. The main character of the Tuesday, day one, is Ohio State, going on the earliest of the 3 days. We got to see a little bit of Ryan Day, as well as 3 of their players, Jack Sawyer, Denzel Burke, and Emeka Egbuka. Now, I didn't think that there was anything particularly great about anything that they had to say. Now, one thing that I do like about the Ohio State contingent is that they are way more forthcoming with information than Michigan is. We have certainly been harbawed even going into the Sharon Moore era of Michigan football. But nonetheless, what was interesting was hearing some of the things that they had to say about Michigan, in particular, losing to Michigan each of the last 3 years. Now, there is a little bit of a different tenor when it comes to Ohio State at this event compared to the last couple of years, because going into 2021, right, they are coming off of 4 straight Big Ten championships, and they were riding high. They had didn't feel like they had anything to lose. They didn't feel like they were going to lose. And then yet they ended up losing to Michigan. You get to 2022, they felt like that was an aberration. They felt like that was just a one-off, essentially. And then it didn't quite go that way. And then you get to the next year. Kind of the same thing, right? And you started hearing things about, I don't remember if this was said in actual Big Ten Media Days, but in general, about how if just a couple plays went differently, things would go differently. If we would have won the game, then we would have won the game, type of thing. But now, after the 3rd loss to Michigan in a row, it felt a lot different. Let's start with Ryan Day, and then we'll get to some of the players, because I thought it was interesting because normally he would want to talk a little bit more about the Michigan rivalry. He'd have a lot more to say. He was asked 2 questions about it. One of them was about how well does he know Sharon Moore and what does he expect. He only really gave one line. and only answered the second question, being like, we expect them to basically look exactly the same as we've seen them look throughout this time. But when it came to what do you do to kind of get back into things, he said we're not making any more excuses. We're not talking about a couple plays here, a couple plays there, the refs or any of that stuff. We are talking strictly about what we need to do to improve. The way that I look at it is there is still a confidence bordering on hubris based off of what I saw. Take a look or take a listen to what Ryan Day had to say.
I think when you look at year in and year out, the expectations are what they are, and every year you have an opportunity at Ohio State. You have an opportunity to win every game, and that's what the expectations are, and that's because of the great players and coaches that have come before, and we certainly understand that. And after every year, you got to identify what are the things that have held you back from reaching your goals, knowing that we want perfection and we want to win the game at the end of the season. And in particular, like last year, what was it that prevented us from finishing off that last drive or getting off the field on defense, and why didn't we do that? And it's easy to say, well, it comes down to a play or two, but that's not really the case. We need to leave no doubt. No doubt. Don't leave it to one play. Don't leave it to one call. Don't leave it to one stop. Leave no doubt when you're on the field. And we're not going to get into all the reasons or all the things that we've done to try to address that, to get that fixed. But we worked hard on that, and we feel good about where we're at going into the season.
So the way that I look at that is it's very... like I said, it's confidence bordering on hubris, because the leave no doubt part, to me, just makes it sound like he still really believes all of the things that he kind of has made excuses for before. Now, when you get to some of the other things that he said, like up on the podium, which was televised on Big Ten Network earlier today, he said that that's Ohio State was going to go as the offensive line goes, right? They're talking about all this collection of talent that they've accumulated, all of these different goals that they have. And one of the things he said is we owe it to our players to get this done. But it was, again, kind of more in that foregone conclusion type of mentality as far as what I could tell. So with that, it still feels like they do feel like it is their birthright, that they are destined to win the game. Now, maybe I have it wrong. Maybe I'm wearing maize and blue colored glasses as far as that's concerned. But that is still kind of what I am getting from what Ryan Day has to say as far as this. But otherwise, he didn't talk. Wasn't asked about Michigan, didn't talk about Michigan. There was still a relatively big crowd. It felt a little bit less. I think that's in part because now with things spread out, Ohio State on day 1, Michigan on day 3, you didn't have the big gaggle of Michigan reporters. There were only 3 of us that were here on the ground, Matthew Lounsbury from Wolverine Digest and Aaron McMahon from MLive. So it wasn't like there was like this large collection of Michigan people descending upon the Ohio State. And that'll be interesting to see with Sharon Moore in a couple days, if that's anything different. So let's talk a little bit about what Jack Sawyer said, because there's some stuff that he had to say, and I'll let you listen to that as well. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. But before we do, listen, I love sports. Sports are kind of back, but still not back. And sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But the good news is I can go on to FanDuel at any time and dream up any kind of bet that I want. Here's the great thing. They've got a bonus for you every single day this summer so that you can continue to play, continue to have fun, do all the things with FanDuel that you were able to do before, plus a little added extra bonus. So check out FanDuel.com. Get started today. Have that fun. Make the sports count a little bit more, especially in this drier season. But there is baseball. So remember, FanDuel, official sportsbook of Major League Baseball. All right, so I wanted to pull this up to make sure that I had this right here. This is one of a couple things that was said. So, like, Emeka Egbuka and Jack Sawyer both had kind of similar things to say. I've got to X out of this in order to tell you exactly what's here. But I'll read you an Emeka Egbuka quote. This was thankfully sent to me from Michael Cohen at Fox Sports. Here we go. Actually, it wasn't Emeka Egbuka, it was Denzel Burke. He said this. Asked about the losing streak to Michigan, he said, it's not something I really think about, but we didn't get it done the past 3 years, but it's our job this year to change that narrative. And then he continued and said, well, I guess I can take that back. It's something that we think about every day. So, good save, man. Real good. But yeah, it's tough, but at the end of the day, we didn't get the job done, so it's our job this year to just go in with the mentality of just getting a W. And then asked if Michigan is looming kind of over everything when it comes to the football program. He says it's not a good feeling, but at the end of the day, it's football, and it's our job this year to be able to change the narrative. So that's fine, but it's kind of funny for him to kind of say it's not really something he thinks about, right? Because one of the things we bring up on this show all of the time is the 2019 Big Ten Media Days. If you remember, you hearken back to that day, 5 years ago. Ohio State went on day 1, Michigan went on day 2. Michigan was already the talk of everything because Jim Harbaugh went on the TK podcast with Tim Kawakami and said that controversy follows Urban Meyer everywhere he goes. Michigan was picked to be the preseason number 1 in the media poll. Didn't quite work out that way once the season actually came. But walking away from that Big Ten Media Days, I was uber impressed with everything Ohio State. And I remember huddling up with Brandon Brown, formerly of Wolverines Digest, and he and I were like, Michigan's in trouble. Like, Michigan is in trouble because Ryan Day had a really good pulse on everything. He was very impressive. He talked a lot of X's and O's. He talked about, philosophy and strategy and all of these things. And I was like, this guy is sharp. When it came to the rivalry, he seemed to have kind of a really good, clear idea of what he was doing. And he did that year, right? He still had Urban Meyer's team. And then going and talking to all these players, Jonathan Cooper and some of these other guys. There was a KJ Hill and I'm blanking on the safety's name, even though he's the one that I know the most. They all kind of have the same Manchurian Candidate type of testimony of this idea that, we do all these things in preparation. We're doing, if it's 200 days out, we're doing 200 push-ups and we're looking at block M's. If it's 178 days out, we're doing 178 pull-ups and we're looking at block M's. They had all these things that were designed to make them hate Michigan. And it made them fanatical. So when they're seeing the block M, when they're seeing the winged helmet and all of these things, this hate really kind of poured out. And that really kind of, I think, set them up in a way that I think that really gave them an advantage. Now, a lot of things have changed, right? When you have Ryan Day out there saying things like, we're going to go as our offensive line goes, I think every Michigan fan salivated at hearing that, because it's like, even though he's talking highly of the offensive line, he's talking about the great job that Justin Fry is doing as the coach, and he's talking about all the players and Josh Fryer and how good he is, and some of these other guys and how good they are. I think that if you're a Michigan fan, you feel pretty confident because you're like, but yeah, who do they have to go up against, right? They got Seth McLaughlin from Alabama. But we all know who he is because we saw how he did when he had to face off against Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. So I think that makes Michigan fans that much more confident, kind of knowing like, okay. But on top of it, when you hear kind of that confidence, that hubris and all of that stuff in my eyes, I think that says, okay, he kind of understands it, but he doesn't get it, right? And with that in mind, that's kind of what Jack Sawyer pushed back against. So he's talking about what Ryan Day and all of basically just stood up for his head coach and said he gets dogpiled on quite a bit, saying that he doesn't understand or doesn't care about the rivalry, and that couldn't be any further from the truth. Here's the whole exchange that Jack Sawyer had to say about Michigan from today's Big Ten Media Days.
Back to the Woody Hayes days, I've talked to recruits that knew. You didn't mention the team by name, you said the team up north.
Yeah.
The first player to always beat them. There are 3 M flags hanging over there from the last 3 championships. And I tried to ask your teammate over there if that bothered him. He said, I'm not thinking about any of that. And Mecca's like, no, you just sidestepped it. But how much does it burn with you that that's something that's got to be done?
Yeah, the past few years are definitely, 3 seasons that, we came up short against those guys. And, I'd be lying if I told you that it didn't burn a fire inside of us. So, definitely something that we think about, and we know what's at stake when we play those guys. All of our goals and aspirations for the season rides on that one game in November. And, they hate us, we hate them. That's the way it's got to be. That's the way we want it to be. So that's what makes that rivalry so fun. And we're just looking forward to that game this year.
I've always understood that the bar has always been set that high at Ohio State. And yet I have other people that say to me, don't you think Coach Day gets unfairly criticized because there have been surrounding circumstances with that game with the team up north, but 3 losses are 3 losses, and even though you've probably beaten almost everybody else, that's where the bar is, or do you think he gets a raw deal?
Well, I think it's a tough thing to look at. I know, if you ask Coach Day, Coach Day's man enough to sit up here and tell you that that's part of the job he signed up to do. But me being a guy who would go to war for him any day, regardless of the topic, I think he gets wrongly criticized on a bunch of stuff. A bunch of junk comes out after we lost to those guys a couple of times about him not caring, which is just completely, couldn't be more wrong. So I think he does get unfairly criticized at times, but like he said, he knows what he signed up to do, and we all signed up to do the same thing as well, and we've fallen short as well. So if anything, it doesn't go back on him, it goes back on us as players, and that's why we decided to come back.
Jack, good luck this year, enjoy it.
Thank you.
Jack, with the guys that decided to come back,
All right, so just pulling up the quotes just so I can see them here, because obviously our setup is not one where I'm sitting there looking at the video. If you can't see, I'm sitting on the field at Lucas Oil Stadium, so I don't exactly have like a nice elaborate setup here. But oops, I pulled up the wrong article. So here we go. So I just think that I think it's interesting because he says he thinks he got unfairly criticized at times, but he's known what he signed up to do, and we've all signed up to do those things as well. It's nothing like particularly egregious, right, at all. But at the same time, it's the type of thing that I think we've kind of gotten accustomed to hearing Michigan players maybe say, but with a little bit more confidence, right? Because one of the things that the way that we all kind of look at Ohio State in the prior to the last 3 years is that they believe it's their birthright to beat Michigan. And it seemed like that. I mean, it felt like they were going to do it in perpetuity, as it were. Right? I remember seeing some Ohio State writers who I'm friends with. I know some of y'all hate that, but I am friends with some of these guys because there's more to life than rivalries, right? But at the same time, like they were saying things like, when is Michigan ever going to beat Ohio State again? Like what? And they were starting to put out numbers like maybe 2050, maybe 2070, but they weren't joking, right? Because they just looked at the hegemony that Ohio State had kind of created in the conference. And in a lot of ways, they aren't wrong, but it's kind of funny because now here we sit. Ohio State had kind of the day to itself because the other schools that went were like Northwestern and Rutgers and Illinois. So this was none of the new schools were here yet. So it wasn't exactly like Purdue was here today too. So it wasn't like it was a big, day where everyone was here to hear, two schools. Like we're going to kind of see in the next couple of days when you're going to have Oregon and USC and some of these other schools that are going to, have a lot more of a crowd, I would imagine, than some of the old guard that has been here or was here even today. So it'll be interesting to see what Michigan's turnout is. But with Ohio State essentially having the day to itself, I feel like you're still seeing kind of this mentality of where they think they run the conference, but also with a little bit of the humility from the idea that, hey, they haven't gotten the job done, mixed with, but we're going to get the job done, that's why we came back. And that's not terribly different. What do you expect them to say? To some degree. But in some ways, you would expect also a little bit more reverence. Now, Jack Sawyer, as you heard, did say, we hate them, they hate us. That's literally the same words that I've heard from pretty much every Ohio State player at this, as well as Michigan player. So they say things have changed. We'll see if it's more than personnel. And obviously, Chip Kelly is going to have a say in that. Ryan Day and a lot of the Ohio State media was very enthusiastic about what his addition means to the team. Let's move on to the couple other of the news items of the day. Warde Manuel gets a big award. A lot of you probably don't like that, but we're going to talk about that, as well as some well-deserved preseason honors, which kind of tells me that maybe things should have been rethought when it comes to the media poll that just came out. Maybe, just a little bit. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. All right, let's finish out here. Let's finish strong. If you're wondering how this whole thing works, normally, we don't have the 3-day, right? That's new for this year. But normally I am here for 3 days. But because I wanted to be here in time for the Ohio State stuff, I didn't want to leave Zuri for too long. She's staying with my grandma. My grandma's old, and she always stresses out when she has to watch Zuri. And then by the time that I'm on my way home, she's like, you can leave her here for another day or two. Every single time. Nonetheless, I didn't feel comfortable with leaving Zuri for so long. So what did my day look like? Well, if you followed the show for some time, you've heard me tell you that I am an insomniac. I have an insanely hard time sleeping, and I can't sleep in that much either, which means I'm exhausted all the time. But today is even more so because I woke up at 6:30, which for some of you is normal. For me is not, because I don't usually fall asleep till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, no matter what time I try to go to bed. and then made my way down here to Indianapolis. Got here at noon, so it's a little bit longer day. But because it's a little bit more chill, makes it a lot more fun and a lot more manageable, which is exciting. Nonetheless, on my drive down here to Lucas Oil Stadium, I got the news that the National Football Foundation is giving the award that they give. I can't remember the name of the award offhand, so don't hold me to that name. That they are awarding Warde Manuel with what basically is Athletic Director of the Year. Now, keeping in mind that this comes on the heels of earlier in the year, Warde Manuel being named as the eventual chairperson for the college football playoff. So you're going to see a lot more of him from a national perspective. I just think, like, yes, I understand that there's some gripes. I'm not going to begrudge you some of the gripes, that slow-footedness on NIL. I would say the department, not necessarily Warde, but the department's handling of a lot of the Connor Stallion stuff, the aftermath. Some of that falls on the university as well. Some of the things that I don't like that the way the university handled, especially with this being told from some top brass, hey, we're gonna batten the hatches, we're gonna go to the mattresses, we're gonna do everything we need against the Big Ten to make sure that they can't walk all over us, and we'll leave the conference if they actually try to, only for them to lay down immediately. That's not solely on the athletic director. That was certainly a above his pay grade type of decision. Nonetheless, I bring this up more so to let you know, again, much to the chagrin of a lot of you, every time that we have a Warde Manuel episode, I notice that the likes on the episodes on YouTube are far less than they normally are. But nonetheless, again, I bring this up to caution those of you who just, for whatever reason, think he's out soon or think that he is doing the worst job in the world. That's not how other people see it. Now, again, I brought up some of the instances in where he could have been better, but you look around college football, you're very rarely going to find an athletic director that the fan bases are absolutely loving. I bring this up as also a caution-ish type of thing. Think about where things used to be. Think about a man named Dave Brandon, who actually was a debacle, who actually did a lot of things that were very wrong. And really kind of set things back after initially looking like a superstar, getting Michigan out of the NCAA violations from Stretchgate. Things can be worse and have been worse. So you have that. But moving on to our final thing, really cool stuff as you see that 3 players made the 12-man list of the preseason honorees from the Big Ten. Michigan second on that list behind Ohio State. But nonetheless, Will Johnson, Colston Loveland, Mason Graham making that list. Certainly Donovan Edwards and Kenneth Grant could have been on that list as well, but they had to dwindle it down to 12 players across 18 teams, and that's a hard thing to do. But for those who think that Michigan's going to have a hard fall-off, it would require those players not playing up to expectations, other players not playing up to expectations. I think Michigan's in a lot better spot, especially if they can get the line play that they've had. Obviously, Mason Graham's on that list. The good news is you've got guys at different levels. You kind of look around the entire roster. You've got kind of levels working for you, right? You look and say, okay, offensive line should be good. Just by virtue of it's been, and a lot of these players have been waiting in the wings. We've seen a lot of them. That should be a good situation for them. Then you look at some of these other players. You've got a star running back in Donovan Edwards. You've got the star tight end in Colston Loveland. You've got some potential at wide receiver. You go to the other side. All right, you've got the defensive line on lock. You've got Jayshon Barham, Ernest Hausman at linebacker. That's great. You've got great safeties. You've got Will Johnson, and then maybe other corners. It's levels, right? You've got at least one star player almost at every position, and then other players who you feel are probably going to be pretty good. So I think that's a pretty good omen for where things will go. But we will find out in about a month just how good they might be. So anyway, that's going to do it for today's episode. Tomorrow we will discuss some of those new Pac-12 teams coming in, as well as Michigan State, as we report live, not live, but recorded live for me, not for you, Day 2 Big Ten Media Days. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. We will talk to you again soon. Peace.